Nothing defines a Zelda game more than its dungeons, and for a very good reason. Since with the exception of Breath of the Wild, the dungeons have been among the most important highlights of each Zelda title all the way back to 1986, and was really the only field left where the Zelda franchise was unrivaled against Western competition.
It was also the one field the Zelda team should not have messed with prior to Breath of the Wild. Now then, this video took quite a while to put together, so show some love by liking it, and if you are new, subscribe, because we are planning more top 10 Zelda videos moving forward. Okay, let's not waste any more time and get into what we consider the best of the best dungeons the Zelda franchise has to offer, beginning with crime and punishment is a recurring theme in Zelda, so a dungeon that is literally a thieves' hideout is perfect. Where the boss door is located right next to the entrance? Brilliant. Anyhow, what makes this dungeon stand out amongst other dungeon candidates for this list, including a link to the past's Thieves' Town, is the wall merging mechanic. The many traps you can activate to your advantage while trying to safely lead the freed thief girl back to the entrance and gain the key to the boss's chamber.
On the surface, the level design of this dungeon is linear and nothing to scream about, but that is the purpose, since the true key to this dungeon lays in the wall merging mechanic to advance through gaps, and then use the many trap switches and your arsenal of weapons to keep the thief girl safe from the pursuing Zazak. The boss fight is a great conclusion to this dungeon, where you use Link's wall merging ability to outwit and stab Stalblind in the back. Overall, a simple but very entertaining dungeon with great interior and level design, music and tension in its second half. As a Norwegian, it is a given that I love winter, whether it is to stand and look out from one of my nearby hills and take in the gorgeous view, or sky uphill and downhill the depths of the local forest that surround the place I live. It is in our blood. We adore that nice cold time of the year, and it shouldn't come as a surprise that I also love winter areas, and more of the winter-themed dungeons in the Zelda series. After all, my first Zelda Unknown episode was about Snow Peak, and that was no coincidence. So no surprise here, Snow Peak Ruins had to make it to this list. For one, since you get to the noble mansion by sliding after a giant yeti on a frozen leaf down a giant mountain slope. 2, the dungeon is set inside a snow and ice covered mansion filled with knight armor and other coats of arms, and a courtyard. And 3, the main objective is to collect ingredients for Yeto's superb soup to nurture his ill wife back to health.
Yes, this Norwegian will drag you up the worst hills or even a freaking ski jump in the middle of summer. But back to Snow Peak Ruins. Since what more could you ask for? I don't know, the dungeon item you get after beating the mini-boss, being the mini-boss's weapon? Some truly interesting chamber and outdoor areas where you battle white wolfos and imp pose as Wolf Link, completely demolish a chapel, and then use cannons through libraries and to break the ice between you and the top of the mansion. Then you battle Yeto's corrupted wife Yeta, and though the gameplay of this boss leaves much to be desired, the aftermath is truly the best Zelda boss you can play against on Valentine's Day. The music, noble mansion setting, and the chilly nature of this dungeon are the reasons why Snow Peak Ruins freezes a spot on this list.
It is mostly the fact that you play both as Link and the Rito's Edge medley that brings the Wind Waker's Earth Temple on this list. Here you have one of the most beloved characters in the game that you expect to be non-playable, all of a sudden becoming playable, thanks to the command melody, and on top of that being a character that moves great, can bring Link over small gaps and fly shorter portions on her own.
Yes, Medley is the star of this temple, but that doesn't mean that the dungeon doesn't hold merits of its own. Quite contrary, as the Earth Temple is, in many ways, Wind Waker's Shadow Temple, but to some extent also fused with Ocarina of Time's Spirit Temple, thanks mostly to the clever mirror shield light-based puzzles and being littered with poisonous blue fog, bubbleheads, stalfoses, floor masters, pose, and coffins filled with the most freaky re-deads. The only drawback of this dungeon is its boss, but other than that, the Earth Temple shines through with its visual design, music, and overall atmosphere. There are so many iterations of Hyrule Castle throughout the Zelda franchise, And though Twilight Princess's Hyrule Castle was great, we have to give this one to Hyrule Castle in Breath of the Wild. Mostly because it is an example of what to expect from the future of Zelda Dungeons. In fact, with a few alterations, it might mark the beginning of a whole new type of Zelda Dungeon open-ended temples, where you are able to enter and leave the structure however and whenever you please, and that the structure itself has multiple layers and variety of treasure, items, weapons, enemy defenses, etc., both on the inside and outside. In Hyrule Castle's case, the most valuable treasures and items are found after a long time of first-time exploration of the castle, which is heavily guarded by the most powerful regular enemies found in the game. And this is no exaggeration, as the path to one of Link's lost memories, Zelda's Diary, the King's Diary, multiple high-level weapons, ingredients, recipes, treasure, and finally the Hylian shield are closely guarded by an army of decayed guardians, guardian turrets, air-based guardian skywatchers, heavily armored moblins and Lizalfos, Lynels, and in the case of the Hylian shield, a Stalnox. Hyrule Castle is a massive fortress, infested by enemies that need to be infiltrated from both the inside and outside, unless you are heading straight for Calamity Ganon through the castle waterfalls.
We want more dungeons like Breath of the Wild's Hyrule Castle in the future. However, if we are to suggest one improvement to this new dungeon formula, then perhaps it could be a benefit to lock some areas away behind locked doors, like say, I don't know, to the final boss in the game? Does it really hurt to force the player to do some more non-linear exploration or solve puzzles and then fight a mini-boss for keys and slowly build up to the final fight? No, it doesn't, but still, this dungeon knocks it out of the park in its visual, musical, and gameplay departments.
What a temple this is! Taken straight out of ancient Egypt and the 1001 Arabian Nights, the Spirit Temple leaves a massive impression on players, from its entrance adored by a massive statue of the goddess of the sand, to massive cobras that instruct you, and from here, it just gets better and better. The temple is divided into two sections. Upon completing the child section, beating your first iron knuckle, and bearing witness to Kawome and Kotake kidnapping the independent Nabooru. Then you are faced with the adult section of the temple, and here you find a massive variety of enemies from all other temples in Hyrule jammed into the edge of Gerudo Desert.
We will admit, a few other temples on this list outmatch the Spirit Temple, but this dungeon still nails the Arabian theme throughout, with Gerudo interiors, the Goddess of Sand, and music, the Iron Knuckle mini-boss battles, the Mirror Shield puzzles, and to top it off, a very climactic two-phase battle against Twin Rover with solid build-up. There's no way to get ready to beat Ganondorf's ass than the Spirit Temple and the liberation of Nabooru in Ocarina of Time. Just said a few dungeons outmatch the Spirit Temple, and the Sand Ship is a classic example of a dungeon that may not have the best boss battle, but where the rest of the dungeon is near perfect. The build-up with the chase and bombardment of the Sand Ship in the Sand Sea, perfect. Boarding and exploring the abandoned ship, also perfect. The mini-boss battle against Servo, damn incredible. And this is only the beginning of the dungeon before you get hold of the bow.
The theme of past and present complement better than in the Spirit Temple, since the transition between the two is seamless thanks to the Time Stones. This simple but brilliant mechanic marks for some truly creative technology and electricity-based puzzles where you have to take advantage of your surroundings in order to progress. This dungeon does not hold back, and takes use of nearly all areas the ship has to offer. There is only one problem with this dungeon, namely its boss, Tantalus. You see, the big Achilles heel of this dungeon creates the perfect build-up, and then ruins everything. At least the aftermath is truly sweet, with Skipper regaining command of the restored Sand Ship. The Sand Ship is an excellent dungeon, which shows what the Divine Beasts could have been if they were treated as proper dungeons, and one of the big reasons to play Skyward Sword, or for Nintendo to bring the game over to the Switch. The climb to this dungeon is long, but when you first get inside, you know immediately that you are about to experience something truly special. Since the Stone Tower Temple is a giant among Zelda temples with 2 major mini-bosses where none of them are pushovers, challenging chambers, and rooms that truly test your abilities as a fighter, an agile Deku Scrub, a mighty Goron, and a Zora swimming champion. The theme of, together we conquer the greatest of struggles, well, unless the gods turn the odds against you, is demonstrated again and again in this dungeon through the clever use of the Elegy of Emptiness and the 3 transformation masks. Since this dungeon is pretty much unpredictability itself. Examples? No problem. For one, when you think you have beaten the Garo Master himself and obtained the ultimate weapon, the entire dungeon turns everything upside down and truly unveils the brilliance that is the second half of this temple.
Then you have the probably darkest mini-boss in all of Zelda, Terminus equivalent of Death, Gomus, or as some prefer to call him, Batman. But wait, haven't you already obtained the dungeon item? Yes, but there is another one that can only be used against a certain boss. Well, at least this was the case in the N64 version of that dungeon. And this brings us over as to why this magnificent dungeon barely misses the podium, namely the timer and the boss. One of the key elements to Zelda Dungeon is to enjoy and indulge in it. And even though we enjoy the Stone Tower Temple greatly, we're not able to indulge in it since this dungeon is massive and the clock is ticking down fast on your first magical try of this temple. If the timer didn't apply inside the temple prior to the boss fight, then the Stone Tower Temple would definitely be in contest for the gold medal. But as it is, this crucial mechanic and the rather random boss fight keeps it away from the podium of the masters.
What do you get when the Hylians, after a terrible occupation, finally defeat Ganondorf, occupy Gerudo lands, and take over the Spirit Temple? The most terrifying prison and dungeon in all of Hyrule, a monument to the Hylian victory over the Gerudo, a symbol of dominance, subjugation, and the ultimate humiliation to Ganondorf prior to his botched execution and banishment. The Arbiters Grounds is soaked in dark lore, and has been the subject of numerous darkest Zelda theories over the years. But first and foremost, this dungeon is a true joy to play from start to finish with just a few minor breaks from action. It may not be the longest of dungeons, but who needs that when you crash into its entrance on a freaking Bulbo and then have to face the freakiest pose, stall children, bubbles, and Gibdos in the series. That and invisible ghoul rats, poison mites, and more that will try to drag you down to your doom. Arbiters Grounds is one of the few dungeons in Twilight Princess that requires you to play as Wolf Link, and lucky for us, those portions are actually really good.
Still, the highlight of this dungeon is no doubt the second half, where you have to navigate through pyramid-like deadly traps, a number of Stalfos battles, the amazing mini-boss skirmish where you, just like in the battles against the 4 Poes, use Wolflink and your sword skills to hunt down what Zelda considers as Ganondorf's sword. The reward? The spinner, one of the best but at the same time most underused items in Zelda history. At least it is crucial to take down the Twillet Fossil Star-Lord, the amazing boss that this dungeon hides. Overall, the fun factor, aftermath, and lack of urgency is what brings it home for Arbiters Grounds in favor of the Stone Tower Temple. Now before we get to number 2 and 1, which was so close, let's go over some honorable mentions. The Forest Temple. You have no idea how many magic memories I have from this dungeon. In fact, if anyone asked me how I would define Zelda magic, then the first minute in this temple is it.
And just like what is the case in the Stone Tower Temple, it just gets better and better from here. First you are greeted by the original Poe sisters, who are the main objective on the path to the dungeon boss. Between you and them, however, there are a few obstacles, such as multiple Stalfos mini-boss battles for keys and bows, puzzles and battles against the Poe sisters for more keys, and the boss key. All of this while doing our best to not get snatched up by the wall and floor masters. Still, the main highlight of this dungeon is the Twisted Corridor, which turns things, well, upside down. The Stone Tower Temple might have done Twist better, but this is the original we are talking about. It is this, the genius dungeon layout, the big ceiling drop, the final encounter against the Poe sisters, the puzzle leading up to Phantom Ganon, and then finally the boss itself that makes the Forest Temple the deserved runner-up. and to be fair, it just slightly missed the dungeon crown, which goes to...
If there's one dungeon type that is notorious in the Zelda series, then it is the dreaded water temples. However, in our humble opinion, the best Zelda dungeon in the series is also a water-themed temple. The Ancient Cistern is the most remarkable dungeon in the series, because it feels so real and furthermore, Japanese. In many ways, this is the dungeon where the Zelda team decided that, you know what, let's give the player the best Japan and Asia has to offer, from religion, landmarks, and mythology. If this is how Nintendo tackles religion, then after Breath of the Wild, please do it again, as we need more temples like this one that are so fresh on the surface and dark in its depths.
No doubt the motion-controlled mini-boss fight against Stallmaster and the water pipeline design that eventually brings you from what can be considered heaven to hell is what makes this dungeon so special. It is a water temple, but where you don't necessarily always navigate underwater. And even then, the underwater gameplay is satisfying and, more importantly, very seamless, and definitely doesn't feel like a slowdown from land since you can ambush enemies while swimming. The dungeon item, the whip, may not be the most interesting in the series, but throughout this dungeon it is really useful, as it is needed to pull switches, hang on poles, swing in the air with it across gaps, steal monster horns from bokoblins, but are not useful against cursed bokoblins that will, just like Redeads, try to strangle you or cast you down while attempting to escape while climbing the spider's thread back to heaven, and the Buddha statue, which is a direct reference to the short story by Japanese writer Ryunosuke Akutagawa.
Overall, the visual design, the soothing music, the dual depth of the dungeon tied to yin and yang, heaven and hell, the real-life religious and mythological references, and finally amazing dungeon boss battle against Coloctus, another religious reference but to Hinduism, makes this dungeon a one-of-a-kind experience in the Zelda series, and in our opinion, the best dungeon in the series. And there you have it, our top 10 Zelda dungeons. But what are your favorite temples? Leave a comment in the comment section down below.
And as mentioned in the beginning, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to leave a like, and if you are new, subscribe and press that shiny notification bell to not miss any of our Zelda 33 videos as we count down to Zelda's 33rd anniversary on February 21st. Finally, we want to thank all of our gracious patrons, and in particular, royal producer Kenyatta Ali for their contributions to the realm. You can join them too by heading over to patreon.com/commonrealm. For now, that's all, girls and guys. We will see you in the next one.